Yeah, sure. So we'll go to Zach in New York. Believes in
Yeah.
God and free will. Pronouns
Hey,
are he, him. Believes in God and free will, and those things are related. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing all right. What's up?
Good. Cool. Yeah. So, I guess, yeah, I kind of left it vague from what I mentioned I wanted to talk about, but I think, and interestingly enough, like just to give a brief backstory, I used to be a huge follower of Sam Harris. Probably you guys are familiar with his work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he talks about free will and all that kind of stuff. But I would say more recently, I've kind of, I think, realized that I think a lot of the theological debate hinges on the question of a metaphysical concept like free will, as an example. I mean, there are other ones like numbers, et cetera. But I guess what I want to talk about is that I think from an atheistic standpoint that it's very difficult to conclude any form of truth being having any legitimate grounding without a faith-based claim. So, of course, the question is faith in what, right? But I think there's certain theological distinctions, we'll say, within Christianity, specifically like Orthodox Christianity, which I think accounts for those distinctions that would make the concept of truth possible. So while I think you mentioned before that a lot of Christians usually use like more personal stories that come to their conclusions, but I would say I'm the exact opposite. Like I grew up very secular. To be honest, I used to make fun of religious people. I thought it was silly, like. But I think I've come to realize that there are a lot of, as equally as many problems, if actually not more problems in the atheistic perspective and worldview than even in any theological worldview. So I just want to hear
Man,
what your opinions are on that, and then obviously, yeah.
Zach, I agree with you that there are Christian attempts at making truth grounded in something better than what an atheist can do, right? I agree that there are attempts in making that possible all the way. I mean, you can talk about Augustine, you can talk about Aquinas. I mean, there's a lot of these Christian philosophers that have really tried to ground the work in, who were inspired by Greek philosophy, to be fair, in making this sort of these truth claims about the world work in relation to the existence of God. I am personally not convinced that gap has been bridged. And for the same reason why you might have critique of postmodern ideas of why we can't have truth, because all of our groundings fail in some way or another. The problem with an idea like truth is, of course, it's been defined in multiple different ways, and there's completely different methodologies on how to attain it. And everything from the Gettier problem onwards, you're going to find issues in having just the very groundwork and basis of how to have, justified true belief, as one person has called it. But I mean, there's no real way around it. I think anybody who's ever attempted this, be it Christian, be it atheist, be it Hindu, whatever, have trying to figure out what is this objective idea of truth that we can all agree on, that we can all agree on the method to. I don't think anybody's ever been able to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't do it, or that we on that. You agree or disagree? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I totally do agree that every faith has made attempts to, and none have done it in a conclusive fashion that everybody will agree to. I completely agree. But I mean, I would say, just, I guess, to push back a little bit. First off, I think the birth of the Christian influence that came from some influence of like Hellenistic philosophy doesn't mean that it's like synonymous or that it's congruent with it. Like, if, for example, in Orthodox faith, Athos, or a lot of the Greek thinkers that are now Orthodox, specifically, they were birthed out of the Hellenistic Greek philosophy. It's still in Greece, and they believe there are distinctions which really sever the two worldviews, like whether it be presuppositions, which one we reject. So I'm just
let me be clear. I don't when I reference the Hellenistic origins of a lot of Christian philosophy, that's not my attempt to invalidate it, but just show that there is origins. Like I'm thinking specifically how, like, there's a lot of Neoplatonism in Christianity that, I mean, literally comes from Plato, right? Like that's how that, that kind of thing.
There's a large. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But I got you, Zach. There definitely is a large. What's that?
Well, let's pin it down here. What convinced you that Christianity has it right, or the Christian methodology of discovering truth is better than or is more successful in that project than any other endeavor? Because I am curious about that.
Yeah,
of course. So
that's kind of all I was going to add. So yes, go ahead. That'd be great.
Okay. Yep. So I would say that given depending on how you want to describe it, but given metaphysical assumptions of an atheistic worldview, basically that, or a materialistic worldview, I know those are not synonymous. You can be an atheist and be an idealist or other forms. There are certain gaps and limitations on what you can prove and know as fact or truth. So I think that what Christianity does is it actually makes, as we already established, a leap of faith, which means belief without material evidence, which I would concede that. There's no way to prove this that we all can agree, because it is based on faith. That it would make the whole worldview is based off of a leap of faith in a belief that God, a form of God that was, in this case, inspired and instantiated in human form in Jesus Christ, in this case, redeems our soul and all the metaphysical presuppositions that are included in that worldview through the form of your own free will. So that the entire faith hinges on the fact, like, let's say, why does evil exist? All these questions that exist both in theistic and atheistic philosophy, there's different answers to it. But in theism, these questions are answered because humans have free will. So I don't, to go back to the other point, I don't believe that everyone will agree on these things. Actually, in Christian theology, it's very, very clear that most people won't agree. The world will hate you for your beliefs. Like that's a big part of why, how Jesus was sacrificed. I mean, there's a lot of cultural anthropology to show that it's not like the whole world's going to agree to these things. I think it's a misnomer to believe that everyone will agree to, quote unquote, a truth, which under an atheistic framework has no grounding. And to your question, why do I believe that, Christianity solves these problems? Because it posits a faith-based claim of something like free will and other ideals, which we can get to, which can account for free will and action and thereby truth by logical, syllogism by definition.
So many things to break down there. I want to respond, but J Mike's just itching. He's itching. He wants to go.
I have a lot. There's a lot because trying to think how I parse it out, because my first disagreement was, or at least wanting more of a clarification on what you mean by faith, because that's going to matter a lot. But because the way I'm looking at faith is, I hold the belief in some proposition. I believe the proposition is true, and I'm really confident that it's true. Justification be damned. It doesn't require justification. I just need absolute confidence that the proposition is true. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Vaguely, I think that's over defining it. I think it's just belief without material evidence. I think
he's talking about Soren Kierkegaard, J. Mike. He's talking about the Christian existential. Just believe it because you can. I think, right?
Yeah, I guess I might be a little too. I might be too pedantic on it, but it does matter because the way, and like you said, from different backgrounds, and this is where my background is going to matter, because the way that I look at a belief is an attitude or a commitment towards a proposition. Okay. What I mean by that is, like, it's raining outside and I have a commitment to that proposition. Well, I can commit to that it being true. I can commit to it being false, or I could commit that I just don't know. Right. And so it seems that if I have a belief in a proposition, like Jesus died for my sins, then I have an attitude towards that proposition or a commitment. And in your case, it's going to be that it's true. And, the way that I'm separating or going further with faith, all I'm adding, the only salt and pepper I'm adding, is just that you really, really think it's true, right? You're really confident in it, right? I mean, I'm seeing what part of that would be an issue.
I would say I have faith in it. I mean, belief is a difficult word. I mean, because if you in Christian theology,
hold on. I'm sorry to cut you off, Zach. Sorry to cut you off, but we can't. If you're trying to understand what moral non-cognitivism is, and I say, well, it's some non-cognitivism about morality, I didn't really help you define anything because I'm using the term. We're trying to understand the analytic notion of faith, so we can't use the term, right? That's not going to elucidate anything. It's not going to illuminate anything for me or the audience. So what I'm asking is, I've given the definition, which is that we have a belief in a proposition and we really think it's true. What would be the issue with that so far?
Because I don't always believe it's true. I mean, I think it's the misnomer is that if someone believes something, there's never moments of doubt, and I think that's what I think it lacks in its definition. Is what I'm trying.
Oh well, so I mean, I could probably grant that you wake up one day and you're not as sure or as confident, but you're just going to define it as this. Today I have this extreme confidence in that the belief is true. So the reason why that matters to me, if we agree on those terms, is that it just seems like you've conceded there's no justification isn't required. That's all you need. Belief, thinking the proposition is true, and really thinking it's true. And so why I'm having this issue with the comparison side to like the atheist worldview, which I don't even know what that really is. And you made a good point. You said you don't. No, I know you said you don't have to be a materialist or a physicalist, which I don't define myself as a physicalist necessarily. Maybe a non-reductive physicalist or something. But point being is that if you have this definition of faith and then you're kind of imposing it on to me, or that I have to make that, I don't know that my claim is that I don't know that I do that beyond the base axioms that I set, right? And the axioms are clearly going to be, they're just what it means to be an axiom is that it's not going to be like justified, right? It's going to be some base set that you start with. And so I am going to disagree with you that I'm making any secondary step of faith like you would be, because what I'm going to do is at least confer to some data, or at least make an attempt. Whether I'm wrong is one thing, but I'm actually, in my example, if you were to call it that I'm using faith, I'm saying I have a component of the belief. I think it's true, but what really prompts me thinking it's true is something justificatory, something that actually does the job of trying to justify that belief being true. Do you see my point? My point is that you don't even have to offer justification.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I think to elaborate on that is I think you're using the word justification as to be tantamount to like material evidence. In this case, that's what you said, because you justify it through actuality, through data.
A priori deductive argument would be fine.
Okay, so then let's use an a priori deductive argument. So if I were to say this, if I were to say that if there's no free will, or there's a few ways to kind of go down this thinking, but let's say that if there's no metaphysical aspect of the human nature, and that people are simply byproducts of so you're saying, hello?
So no, I was listening to you.
Yeah?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry.
You're here?
Sorry. I think it cut out for a second. So I was saying, so if we were to basically take the modern, I think, scientific approach, right, just as an example, I'm not saying that you believe that, but that people are simply mechanistic processes like chemistry, biology, and physics, and that their thought patterns, et cetera, are that there's no free will and there's just mechanistic processes, then by deductive reasoning, as you already alluded to, there's no mechanism by which we can conclude any true statement, because it's just following mechanistic processes. Even if you throw a random element of chance involved at the quantum level, or whatever level you want to call it, there's no scientific or evidence-based, as you should say, component of evidence that would prove any form of free will. Free will is a subjective experience that you have to have faith in my approximation. So I'm saying, as you alluded to, if you want to use a deductive argument, that could be, I think, a very strong one to prove that you would need to make a faith-based claim of free will to conclude any form of truth. I think
it's not going to be strong, because I can be an atheist, and this isn't necessarily my view, but what I could tell you is that I account for free will, and what it is that what it means for an agent to have free will is that they have intentional states, and what it means to have intentional states means necessarily that I can be in accord with getting ice cream, or I can go to the ice cream store and fail, and they're gonna bake in. I have friends that are atheists, and they're going to say that the whole concept of agency is going to be laden with the ability to choose. Otherwise, like it would be vacuous to say that there's agency because you couldn't be in or out of accord with something. You're just like a causal disposition. You're just like a law that's just going. There are people that do hold that view. Now, I don't agree with your assessment in the argument. I'd have to see it in the premises to see where I think it goes wrong. Necessarily, but also it doesn't exclude somebody else in some view that does account for agency, because what you're saying is that free will, like what your statement seems to be, is a biconditional statement, which is that free will can exist if and only if the Christian God exists, or this God you believe in exists.
No, that's not actually what I'm saying. I'm saying that based on the logical syllogism, it's likely, and I have faith in the Christian God without evidence, because I can't have evidence. But I have faith in it because it seems to account for problems which are unsolvable in any other context that I know of. I'm not saying that other faiths can't account for this. I'm saying, given my limited perspective and my own rational thinking process and what I know, because I'm not God, I'm subjective, right? I'm limited in my place and time, what I know, et cetera. I have faith in it, and I can't prove this to you in a way that we both can agree, because it is based on faith. I can see that. And if that's
you would agree that the agent's attitude towards the proposition has nothing to do whether or not the proposition is true. So, for example, if it's raining outside and I came to a free choice that it was raining outside, it just doesn't matter. If I was determined to come to the answer that it's raining outside, the state of affairs is that it's raining outside. So I don't really like, if you want to like,
I'm not claiming that
appeal to like the fact that someone
yeah,
wouldn't be able to, that's understandable in a sense that like you would point out like, hey, you can't really make these, but that just kind of not really begs the question, but it seems to like tell the determinist what they are already granting by being a determinist, right? They're already saying that, yeah, I mean, I am literally just going through these motions, and that's fine. But regardless, Jesus didn't resurrect regardless of whether or not I was a determined meat machine. That would just, I don't really see the force there. But I do want to let Dan get back on too. So.
Go ahead, Zach. You finish your thought.
Of course. Okay, yeah, of course. And I don't mean to be combative. Like I get where you guys are coming from. And to be honest, I mean, you maybe can tell where as I mentioned, like I used to be a huge proponent of secular thinking and all that. So I get the angle. But what I'm like kind of just trying to hammer home is there is no evidence of free will. There's no evidence that you and I can agree to. Like by the same token, you said like how can we come to the conclusion that we agree to this and we have evidence that's irrefutable? There is no, if you look in science, for example, the scientific evidence shows that there's no, I'm not saying it's conclusive, but the evidence points towards the idea that there isn't free will because there's no physical process which accounts for will acting that's not caused by a causal physical process, right? So my point is there is no evidence of free will. So do we reject things that we don't have physical evidence for in this case? I would say that would, it's an Ouroboros.
Really,
right?
No, but it seems easier than that. It just seems easier than that, right? I can choose to end the call or not. I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I can choose to end the call or choose not to end the call. And when I do choose to end the call, we can ask the question, what explains why J. Mike decided to choose A over B, which is to end the call, right? And when we answer
in your brain, but you didn't.
Well, no, it's not even that. I'm not even going there. All I'm saying is that we will appeal to what, is there an explanation or is there not an explanation? If you say, yes, there's an explanation, right? Then, okay, then what does it mean for there to be an explanation? It means that there's a prior trail of things that explain some phenomena, right? And you can just ask like a child, like, why? Why did that happen? Why did this happen? And what we'll see in virtue of explanations is that there are external trails that prompt those things, right? So it's going to be really hard to fit the free will in there. And then in the other case where you just say it's random, nothing explains why J. Mike actually made that decision. Well, then we just have randomness. I don't really know where you fit free will in there either. So you don't need, like, from my perspective, you don't need some argument about like material stuff. You can just propose the issue in virtue of what, if you say that there's an explanation for why I chose this, how do you divorce that from a whole trail of explanations? How do you use volition somewhere sneak in to this entire trail of explanations when what it means to be an explanation is to be backed up by some other antecedent prior thing that gives way to that thing, especially if you're someone that believes in the PSR, right? Like the principle of sufficient reason, especially if you believe in something like that. But sorry, I'm talking over Dan. I need to mute my mic.
Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
I mean, I'm talking a lot too. If you want to say something too, you can say. I mean, I've been talking as well. So, or should I jump in?
Well, I'm thinking a lot about this because, I'm going back to Kierkegaard, Zach. I was a huge fan of Kierkegaard. I mean, when I was deconstructing my faith as a Christian, he was my number one Christian philosopher. I love Kierkegaard. He has these incredibly dense works that are like 400 pages long with ridiculous titles. It's insane. This guy was crazy, but he was awesome. He just wrote these crazy long things. And I think if more Christians read Kierkegaard, they'd be more interesting people. I don't know. I just think that's true. But like this concept of we're kind of talking about two different things here almost, with this free will and the existence of God and the belief in Christianity. Almost three things there, I guess. But it's like I see how you're synthetically kind of putting these two things together, but I'm more interested, I guess, in this idea that material we have to believe, or we choose to believe. If you believe in the free will, we choose to believe despite that of material evidence. That, I mean, that's a fascinating proposition because that's exactly what I thought in the same sort of sense. It's almost wondrous in a way. There's this kind of phenomenology to it that kind of like enjoys the human experience over all else. It's to say that, it's our personal connection with God that's most meaningful in a sense. Like that it very much appeals to me in what I would call in a secular sense, a spiritual way, what could be produced by the human spirit. But to say that, to go that far and to say like, this is this is what I privilege the most, is this experience, more so than any other kind of reasoning, any other kind of evidence, whatever. I mean, in some ways it completely ignores the exact claims that Christianity does in fact make, which I do believe are material in nature.
I don't actually. Just to clarify, I think at your point, I think you think it's kind of off on a separate trail from the central claims. I think the depth to like a Christian philosophy has many layers of depth, and I think interacting at which layer is kind of depends on which part of the journey you're on. So if someone's struggling with certain theological assumptions, starting with the resurrection isn't the proper place to start. So I would say that I don't negate those other things. I just that this is where I think we have a disagreement. I think, of course, there's disagreement there, but there's been much more talking past each other than on this point. I think we can kind of iron out some more theological specific arguments. And just to go back as well, again, another point is I don't just view this as pivotal on free will. I think that's the most critical one. But I would say that it works with other objects like numbers or metaphysical ideals. I mean, I think that there are plenty of other ways to explain what I'm trying to say, but I just think it's the most tangible. And I think it's essential to the theistic framework, especially the Christian framework, is that free will is the essential claim, like the God of free will. This is what it's essential to the history and the faith. Is what
I do think it's a critical point of contention within the Christian philosophical tradition, right? This discussion of free will and the discussion of these, philosophical objects, as you put it. But like, I do think it does distract from the fact, because you actually explicitly said the resurrection is not, what's being talked about here. And I think that's incredible that you say that, because how different that is from the Christian tradition that I grew up in almost every way, right? It's like,
I'm not a Protestant or a Catholic. I would say that.
Sure.
I assume you grew up in the Protestant faith, I would assume.
Sure. But yeah, I did. But if we didn't have that Jesus story, if the gospel stories or any of the New Testament wasn't even there, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now. You know what I'm saying? It's like we could still have these talks about philosophy and
right.
what a concept of God could be, what he allows for this world, what exists in possible worlds, what could exist as free will and stuff. This whole conversation could happen whether or not Christianity exists or not, whether it's true or not. And that's what's really fascinating to me. And that's why I don't think it actually contributes to Christianity at all in that sense.
It seems Dan. It seems like you could ask somebody, or Zach, whenever you became a believer, if we had you today talk to Zach then, and then you gave him this thing, would the former Zach who believed in Christ or whatever it is you believe in, would he not look at you like, that has nothing to do with why I accepted, right, that Jesus exists or died on the cross? So at Dan's point, all these points could be made if you had just bought into some other religion, and they could be true. You could have some a priori deductive argument to show, whatever you want there. But I don't really see how it references to what you actually believe, or if it. And I could be wrong, but I'm not really convinced that you came to the belief in these things for this reason. It sounds to me like theory crafting after the fact, right? That's just what it sounds like to me.
Well, I could be wrong. That? I mean, I'm giving you logical. I just don't understand why you make that assumption. So I mean, I can give you the reason as to why.
You can. How about? Well, you can tell me. You can tell me if. Sure, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. Did these arguments convince you that Jesus died on the cross?
Yes, by logical extrapolation. Yes.
Someone.
With definitive proof? No, but I already conceded that in the beginning of the.
But someone came up to you, and someone came up to you, and they had this proposition that you were inquiring about. You hadn't determined your attitude or commitment yet, which is that it's true or false. And then this person came up to you, or a group of people, or a book, or whatever you read, presents this argument, and then you conclude that Jesus rose, or did you conclude that prior? That's the question.
No, the honest answer took many years of thinking and understanding that there has to be certain presuppositions that you follow through their logical conclusion. And that, yes, I understand that it seems under a modern secular framework very unlikely that a man could rise from the dead, which defeats all forms of material and scientific knowledge. So I understand that's completely against our general sense of the world. But if you're asking,
I'm not disputing that, Zach. Zach, I'm not disputing that. I'm disputing.
Then what's the question? Maybe I'm not gathering exactly what your question.
Before you accepted the proposition to be true that Jesus rose from the dead, before that happened, right? Okay. Did someone come up to you, give that argument, and then you accepted Jesus, or did you accept Jesus and then the argument was presented to you?
The honest answer, I would like to say I accepted Jesus. I think that's a Christian thing to do. But my honest answer is I'm a logical thinker in my approximation. The honest answer is I heard the arguments, realized that I had no account for my own basis of truth or free will or numbers or any form of knowing. And then I had to really do some years of introspection to really realize through logical insight that, and not just logic, I think that logic is
fair.
A useful tool, but it's not everything. So it took me. So the answer is I accept the logical argument, even though I would say from the right Christian answer would be to accept Jesus first, but I didn't. So I mean that's
okay. That's fine. That's fine. And I'm gonna have to take your word for it. I'm not gonna say you're false or that it's not true or something. But
very honest here as much as I can. I think it seems
that's fair. I'm not gonna contest that, but. It's not like I was presented an a priori deductive argument where the conclusion is that Jesus rose from the dead, which is what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in like
that, but it would take a longer time than we'd have here to get to that point. I can give you one that's more framed in terms of what constitutes truth. If that would do, then it can take. I would just say that it's obviously very complicated, and to expect that I can give you a 3-minute deductive reasoning from truth claim to Jesus rising from the dead is not simply in line with
that's fine. I leave emails open, jmike at atheist-community.org. If you want, like, or if you want to call on any Sunday, I'll listen to those arguments. But it seems like there's like these appeals to how people come to reason, and that's fine. But what I'm really concerned with was your reasoning on how you got there. You've thrown out that nope, it wasn't like one thing. It's why it's frustrating. Is that you said it was on faith, but that's just a contradiction to what you're saying now. Because what you're saying now is not.
Why?
It's not because now you're saying that there's an a priori deductive argument which serves as justification. And prior, I went with this whole thing about faith that you agreed with me. It doesn't require the justification. So it just seems a little weird that we're like.
Faith does. No. So faith, when you say justification, what do you mean by justification? Because I think we have different definitions of justification.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying like at least an attempt. Like what I'm saying about faith doesn't require even that attempt. It just requires that you believe the proposition to be true. That was the whole like notion that I went through.
Faith. Well, to be more accurate, and what I'm trying to explain is that I think a proper view of faith is that it's acknowledging where the limits of logic and subjective reasoning get you, and then the delta between that and the truth has to be faith, because the truth is something objective, at least in my approximation. I think this is what the Christian faith posits, and no subjective mind is objective. So the delta or the change or the difference between the subjective mind's reasoning capacity and the truth has to be faith. And I would just say that where you place the faith is important, and I would say placing it in a framework like Christianity gives a more cohesive worldview than placing it in subjective frameworks that don't purport these claims of free will, et cetera. So I think that holistically, it's just taking a step back and realizing and reframing what humans are, what free will is, what truth is, in light of the real context of what we can actually know. We can't know everything. I mean, it's just understanding what human nature is in some sense.
Dan, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, well, I do think because we've only got a couple 20 minutes left of this show. I think we got to take some of the callers after this. So I do want to kind of
okay. Yeah, you guys talk with me.
I wanted to. Yeah, I was going to move on. I wanted to make. Well,
so everybody's got last point.
We all got
background. So yeah.
No, I know we all got last points, but just the next time we call in, we can go over the argument again or present the argument. I'm just I'm not really like seeing like. I guess my main issue is there's a lot of issues where you're just assuming things I don't really fully understand really matter, and then two, that assumes that you have a definition of Christianity that's actually the right one, that's just going to be disputed in historical scripture.
I'll just tell you explicitly, I don't have the right one. I have faith in my limited. I guess there's whole. I'm not gonna. Yeah. I guess
that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
I appreciate the talk. We can talk next time if you want me to answer those questions, but appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. Of course.
Thanks, Zach.